my prior background is operator. Whether we are successful or no depends a lot on the founding team.
You transition from an operator to an investor. Do you see the other way around, which is becoming investor first and then they start building it?
Personally, it's very difficult because not all operators can be investors, just like not all investors can be operators. For me, initially, the first few investments we made, it was a lot of unlearning. At the same time, we also found people who didn't give us money. Internationally, it was more like, yes, Anurag, you've built a business. I think you can build this. I'm going to back you. In India, it was like, yes, Anurag, you built a business. This is something new, so I don't think we can back you.
How do you get these companies, sir?
It's less than 1 in 100 in terms of the actual investment outcome.
A lot of founders who I've interacted with, they always attribute their success in professional to McKinsey.
I paid myself the McKinsey salary only 10 years after. But I thought that, okay, people were actually valuing me. It was McKinsey. McKinsey and I was getting married.
So you wanted to start something of your own. What next step is what to build?
You go down the entrepreneurship path. Don't fool yourself कि it's a 2-year thing and then you'll come back because वो होने वाला नहीं है. We started this brand called Something Grey. तो 6 महीने 8 महीने किया, then I realized that this will actually not scale in the way I was thinking about it.
What was the genesis of Cactus? What will be the turnaround points?
So Abhishek was my brother. He was in Japan on an internship. We were brainstorming क्या करें. About maybe 3 to 4 years later, when we realized actually the service we are providing is helping researchers get published.
So I was seeing your strengths, which was mentioned over thing, and one of the strengths was people management.
So everyone wants leaders they can trust. You basically need oxygen to live, but you don't live for oxygen. So it was never a valuation game that we were chasing. Often you're waiting for that perfect idea, but perfect idea is nothing, kuch hota nahi hai actually.
What sense do you have about the future?
You can imagine 25 years from now, 90 will be the 70s because there will be enough technologies to...
What is that one product or a service that you really, really want? Hi everyone, I'm your host Shivank and we are part of the 01 Network by Zerodha. Together, we intend to bring you insights from the top thinkers in the field of entrepreneurship, technology and investing. What's keeping you busy nowadays in the sense ki in your life? What's taking the most time and what stage?
Abhi in the VC business, you need to do deals. And unlike, the difference between being an operator. So my prior background is operator and now I'm a kind of investor.
Mm-hmm.
Or as an operator, you are kind of busy every day, long hours. And in a way you have more stress because on a daily basis. But you have less stress because on a more kind of midterm or long-term basis because everything is under your control. Right? So it's you are running the ship.
Yeah.
So everything is in a way, if you enjoy control or if you enjoy being responsible for things, it is less stress in that way, though it is obviously daily a lot of stress. So in that sense, to answer your question, right now we're busy trying to find the correct deals. And so you have situations where suddenly you're very busy and suddenly you aren't because, depending on the pipeline. So as of now, we have 3 deals that we are actively pursuing. All 3 are very good. So the stress is there more at a macro level. It's less right now, but at a macro level in the operating, in the investing business, the stress comes from the fact that there are many things out of your control. तो अभी जैसे हमने पैसे डाल दिए वो हमारे कंट्रोल में है उसके बाद we are minority investors. So whether we are successful or no depends a lot on the founding team.
Because they are running the ship.
They are running it. It depends a lot on the markets because success is driven also by your eventual exit. And the exit kind of window is, in a way, this is unfortunately not an evergreen fund that, it's not permanent capital. We see straight up as a 8 to 10 year fund. So exit window is typically a 2-year, 3-year window where you start selling. So that is defined by markets. There's a lot more things that are not in your control. So there's stress at that macro level. So that's a very interesting kind of trade-off between the two.
So I thought it's a VC. I was not aware that it's...
Naturally, me and the team we've built at Cactus Partners, we are a little more suited to companies that have already established product market fit. Right? So people, where the founding team knows at a 60 to 70% level where they want to go. And then, of course, we provide capital, but then we provide a lot of other help in terms of scaling, thinking through scaling. And we have these 4 business building levers. We call it CAP, Growth Acceleration Playbook. And these are horizontal levers that we think are useful to any company in the scale-up journey. So the 4 levers are organization design.
Okay.
Are you structured correctly? For that next phase of growth, tech scale up. Typically, all companies face some challenge around the tech piece, scaling up their business from a tech perspective. Third is marketing and branding. So the stage we invest in marketing, typically founders have thought through because they need to get the revenue in, but they've never really thought about branding. And how do I look at brand to get that next? So marketing and branding is the third lever. And the fourth is international expansion. So all our portfolio companies have some sort, at least 70-80% of them have some sort of an international story. So we come in the sweet spot for us to make the best use of us and what we enjoy, even as minority investors, is to come in and help companies, help the founder. It's a pull-based thing. So we are minority investors. We don't push, and we back to founders. So we don't push our views, but we find founders often appreciate this kind of help in accelerating a little bit of their growth curve. So to answer your question on seed versus venture versus private equity, so since we've started, we have started to lean more towards kind of Series A, B, which is not really private equity. So it's early growth capital. It's early growth capital, but it is not venture or seed capital. So just typically हमारा $80 million का fund है. $80 million fund में typically companies will invest in 20-25 venture funds. We'll do 20-25 investments. We will do 10 to 12 investments.
With larger
check sizes, and we will then work with our the companies we back to help them scale up.
Interesting.
One of the interesting questions that actually came across from this is the fact that you transitioned from an operator to an investor. Now, one of the biggest challenges is, it's also about the letting go, because you have to let go of the control, let go of the thoughts and, the strings in the hand to sort of become an investor, where you are able to see, but you don't have to intervene. 2 questions, actually. So first is about how did you mentioned about the podcast and things, but personally, how did you feel this transition, happening, and this idea of 20 years and, the years of building that operator control now transitioning? And the second thing is, for someone who wants to build, many people, they sort of build and then they become investors. Do you see the other way around, which is becoming investor first and then they start building it?
It's a good question, actually. It's because personally, it's very difficult. Like your natural instinct and the training that I've had being an entrepreneur 20 years is to take charge, to say, hey, this is how things should be. Even though you have a team working with you, your entire thinking is around, okay, let's go from here to there. Let's do this. You have a view. You have an opinion. And that's opinion many times is wrong, but that opinion is what takes a company ahead, right? And in investing, obviously you have an opinion when you're backing the company, but even after you're backing the company and you're working with the founders, you have an opinion or you have a view, let's build the annual plan this way. Yeah, this is what 5 things we should do from a prioritization perspective, or these are people that we should hire or not hire. And so for me, initially, the first few investments we made, it was a lot of unlearning to actually not present that view. Because often, and the first year and a half, when I presented to early investments, they would naturally, I'm the one putting in the money, or we're putting in the money, they would naturally be very respectful, listen, and say, haan, theek hai, Anurag, and you've built such a big business also, Anurag, so you know a little bit more, so yes, we'll listen to you. And many of them would listen. They would also try to they would agree, they would try to apply it or apply what I was saying. Some would work, some would not work. But in general, what I've realized over the last, now it's been 3.5 years, is the way I run a business and the way you run a business, if you were not, or the way you're trying to start something, is very different, right? And so what might work for me in terms of if I'm thinking about advising you for your company and saying, if I were in your place, I would do these 5 things and please do it. That actually will not work for you because you have a different style, a different pace. You are a little more embroiled in the details of the company. You know a lot more. And so often, if you listen to my feedback and don't push back, actually, it is the wrong thing to do. And so that is something I learned. So I realized that people who actually also, it was difficult for founders to push back just because they come in with, Anurag, you know better, right? And so it has taken me some time to adjust, still adjusting, to say, I need to ask more questions. I need to suggest things only when necessary, only when there is a demand. There is, Shubham actually asked me, aap batao kya karna chahiye, right? As opposed to me telling you what to do. So these are things that personally, it has taken time. But the act of running the fund itself, setting that up, we are a 12, 13 member team. So that is to me is now operations, right? Now we're going to be launching Fund 2 in a year's time. So that is operations. So there we, as a partner, I have two other partners, Amit and Rajiv. There we exercise more control. We do things the way we want to do. We are changing kind of our approach, our strategy, learning from every new investment. But with the investing companies, it's a little bit, let's park the operator hat and try and be more pull-based in terms of advisory. So I don't know if that answers your question. So that was the first question. The second question is people who've been investors and want to go ahead and become an operator.
Yeah, so people become operator, then they become investors. Do you see the other reverse trend, which is becoming investor and then becoming an operator?
I think दोनों चीज हो रहा है. I don't know which is correct. So, people, each person has their own strength, weakness. I tend to work a lot with the details and then build out. Many people work top down and come, so it's both are possible. I think what we found is from my journey, what I found, at least the people who backed us in Fund 1, they liked the fact that the team had a mix of operators and investors. And that's the reason they actually gave us money, that, okay, here's someone who's actually built a business. So they will understand a little more. Maybe when they're evaluating the nuances, the challenges, they'll understand execution a little more. They'll assess people a little differently. And also once investing, they may be able to guide companies better. So that's what we found, At the same time, we also found people who didn't give us money, who said,
No track record.
No track record to standard hai, but also you're an operator. So if you're an operator, I don't know if you can invest. I'd rather you show me that you can invest, because not all operators can be investors, just like not all investors can be operators. So we had those people also who were like
Skeptical about
skeptical, and we found a difference also in how and this is a broad generalization, but how Indian investors or LPs, limited partners, were viewing us versus international. So the international investors and given private equity VC is a more developed asset class in the US. Internationally, it was more like, yes, Anurag, you've built a business. I think you can build this. I'm going to back you, right? In India, it was like, yes, Anurag, you built a business, but this is something new, so I don't think we can back you. So there was a lot more risk-taking appetite in the US, where we primarily raised capital, versus India. So that was also another interesting kind of thing we saw. Yeah.
And what was the story? What was the pitch to the LPs, sir?
Well, the pitch to LPs was just it morphed, of course, in the fundraising journey. But it was a little bit of what I've just said, that, okay, they built a company. That company, actually, if Cactus Communications itself is 2 or 3 companies inside that one company. So understand the kind of start and the scale-up journey. India is an exciting market. So want to do that with other industries in India. And we are going to come in at rather than a sector-focused strategy, we had a stage-focused strategy. That what we understand is companies that already have product market fit, that are already doing, while we don't have a revenue cutoff, they're already doing some amount of revenue, and the entrepreneur knows where he wants to go. तो वो हमारा gating strategy है, और उसमें we will pick companies and entrepreneurs or founding teams that are interesting, that we want to work with, and we'll help them scale.
How do you get these companies, sir? How do you pick these companies? Because अगर आप private investor हो, so there is a universe of 5,000 listed companies.
Correct.
And then आप अपने सारे ट्रैक वो निकालते हो. यहाँ पर आप कैसे ढूंढते हो? Because अगर कोई कोलकाता में कंपनी ऐसी, how do you find that?
So when you get the word out, I think once you've raised capital, you'll be surprised how quickly people know that okay, this company or this person has money to invest. So the word travels fast, but of course you can't rely on that. So you do your brand building, marketing. But more importantly for us as a team, as a partnership, the way we are structured, which is a little different from most other firms, and which is also the way I think I have been a little successful in my entrepreneurial journey, is understanding where my strengths are, playing to my strengths, and then finding folks on the team who can complement what are not my strengths, right? And between the 3 of us, we have, while all of us are involved in most activities of the fund because it's a small team and everyone does a little bit of everything, but in terms of the alpha and where the differentiation is, I spend a lot more time with the founders in helping them scale up, right? The ones we back. Amit, my partner, is more strong on the investing side, as in thinking through the investment decision and the outcome and the exit. And Rajiv, who's my third partner, he is very well networked, and so he's to answer your first question. He's the one who's able to get the word out and able to attract enough of a sourcing kind of a pipeline for us to choose entrepreneurs to back. So we have we've seen maybe, like, we typically, it's less than 1 in 100, in terms of the actual investment outcome from what we get, right? So it's a lot of no's, and that's the other thing. You got to getting to say no. That again requires a lot of learning.
आज जब हम सुबह आ रहे थे सर, तो I was just डूइंग माय रिसर्च एंड मैंने भैया को बोला कि सर दार्जिलिंग से मैं पढ़े हुआ, एंड ही सेड कि यार सेंट पॉल्स, मैंने बोला यार आप कैसे जानते हो, तो बोल रहे इट्स वन ऑफ द फेमस स्कूल, मैं की शूटिंग वहां पर हुई है.
That's, I think everyone knows वो 2004 में जब शूट इसका St. Paul became like the talk of the town.
So Mehuna, I think मेरा नाम जोकर is where it started में, फिर उधर राज कपूर thing, एक दो और एक अमिताभ की कोई पिक्चर थी, and then Mehuna of course most recent.
जब आप थे कैंपस पे तब कुछ हुआ था?
तब एक दो बंगाली फिल्म हुई थी, but none of these I missed. In fact, I was on holiday last week. I was in Darjeeling. I had taken my kids there. I studied in such a beautiful surrounding with views of what we see, the mountains kind of daily.
क्या दिखा आपने दार्जिलिंग में?
अभी yeah, generally अभी तो हम स्कूल ही गए थे. स्कूल गए, we had we met one of my old teachers still there, had food in a restaurant that was around when, but yeah, Darjeeling at that time, I think in boarding school was a pretty common thing when I grew up. Now of course it's not.
How was your decision? Did you choose your kids to send to boarding?
Boarding को भेजा ही नहीं मैंने, नहीं, ये तो अभी देखने के लिए. अभी we just went there to have a look. My kids study here.
Okay. So how did you decide कि आप boarding school में थे?
हाँ.
How was your thought process of sending them to a boarding school or a day?
So boarding school, I think we went to boarding school because I think I was not in a metro. तो कुछ खास schooling system अच्छा नहीं था. Abhi my kids are in Bombay. Bombay has enough good schools. So why send them to boarding? Why kind of distance them away from...
I think the only thing is that Bombay mein doesn't have that sprawling, football field and the big, the experiences of it.
But then your kids grow up fast. You guys are still young, I think. Kids grow up really fast. And so now I think it's more emotional कि यार anyway बड़े होके बाहर जाने वाले ही हैं, अभी क्यों बाहर भेजे?
So one question I have, because since we're looking at your illustrious work history as well, so I'll go to your pre-entrepreneur days when you were of course working in the who's and who. So I would love to talk to you about McKinsey, because personally I have, like most of a lot of founders who I've interacted with have talked about this McKinsey halo. I mean, from Shantanu Deshpande of Bombay Shaving Club to many others, there is a McKinsey aura, and a lot of them I know personally who I work with, they always attribute their success in professional to McKinsey, because they say, I am what I am, and the way of thinking has been taught to me by McKinsey. So how did you see your experience of working in McKinsey translating and percolating down to your entrepreneurship venture and now into the investing venture?
So, with some caveat, because I was there only 3 years.
Okay.
2 साल में so I did my university in the US. Then I joined McKinsey, was setting up, this was in late 98, 99. They were setting up a M&A advisory function in Europe, which they had in US. They didn't have it outside the US. So the partner in charge with heading that practice moved to Europe, and I was part of that startup team. Pramath was in India, but this was a person called Tim Kohler. So they wrote this book, Tim Kohler and Tom Copeland, called Cash is King, which is kind of the Bible for valuation. And so anyways, I did 2 years of that. And then my wife is actually from Bombay. She's an ophthalmologist. मुझे भी इंडिया आना था. So I moved back with McKinsey to Bombay. That's when Pramath was, my mentor. Some of the names you mentioned, they were, and McKinsey at that time was a very small office. So everyone knew each other. 1.5 साल इधर किया. Either the work was more typical consulting, more strategy consulting, as opposed to M&A. So I got kind of, I saw both sides. How has it impacted me? I think maybe lots of ways, but let me just talk about two things. So when I left McKinsey, prior to McKinsey, I had obviously 3 years of McKinsey. Before that, I had studied at UPenn. So left McKinsey, became kind of a businessman. Entrepreneur word बाद में बना. Startup, उस time funding इतना था नहीं इंडिया में. So the first 4-5 years was a lot of struggle to figure out what we are doing, whether it'll make any money, whether it'll scale. With McKinsey, you got a lot of just prestige. You got used to that fame कि यार हाँ मैं McKinsey के लिए काम करता हूँ. तो मैं आपसे मिला, आपने बोला यार अनुराग McKinsey के लिए काम करता है, मुझे very smart है, you know. So that feeling, that the business card, the recognition it got to you, that just suddenly disappeared, right? The day you left. And I was a struggling kind of entrepreneur. I paid myself the McKinsey salary only 10 years after starting the company, right? That's how long it took for Cactus Communications to kind of get some scale, some let's say financial kind of independence. So in that sense, McKinsey impacted me in the sense I saw, okay, how the brand kind of makes a difference in how you perceive yourself and how others perceive you. What I thought that, okay, people were actually valuing me.
It was McKinsey.
It was McKinsey, right? And that was in a way good, in the sense that was enabling me also, because I was feeling valued. I was feeling also more powerful, able to do a lot more, right? And that suddenly kind of just hit a dead end. And then I was like 5-6 years almost in the wilderness trying to figure things out, not even earning enough to, make my key. So that was one impact McKinsey had. So I really saw that. And the second, which was the more lasting impact actually, is culture. I saw how a great professional services company is run. How the firm, how it crafted its values, how it trained its associates, how there was a lot of mentorship, camaraderie. It was a very peer kind of thing. McKinsey talked about meritocracy. So some of these things I kind of, in a way, subconsciously built out at Cactus Communications. And there was this always underlying focus or desire that, it has to be a good place to work. It has to be a great place to work. It has to be a place where people want to come and be themselves and kind of grow to their potential. So that is what McKinsey kind of, I think, created that, honed that desire to build a good institution or a great institution. And so that's where, Cactus Communications then eventually, at some point it went on to win various Great Places to Work awards. At one point it was number one in the medium, small category. In the larger category, we were ranked, our best rank was 10 in a list which had Amex at the top 4, Amex, Intel, Google, and Marriott, right? All 4 really large companies, and on that list, Cactus Communications is 10. So that's, I think, some of that credit, I think, in being able to build that kind of a culture that allowed for that to happen, I think would go to McKinsey.
And because you mentioned Pramod sir was your mentor, we are hosting him.
Okay.
What were some interesting conversations you had? Do you remember?
I think 2 things I remember with Pramod. One was ISB was being built at that time, and मैंने bachelor's किया था. So McKinsey has this program where they sponsor you for the MBA. And so Pramod and we had a conversation as Pramod was like, आप MBA करो और ISB में करो, apply करो. और उस time I didn't want to do an MBA. I felt that I'd learned enough and I needed to do something. So I eventually didn't land. I still don't have an MBA. I didn't land up doing an MBA. So I left. So that was one discussion where Pramod was a little disappointed, I think, in me not taking the ISB route. I think the other discussion was when I moved back actually from Amsterdam to India. I was having problems finding apartment in Mumbai, as most people do. My salary was not enough to afford a good apartment.
McKinsey maybe?
Because I got transferred. I got transferred. Later on, they changed it after with Pramad's involvement. But I got transferred in at an analyst salary, not an associate salary. Even though I'd spent about 1.5 years, 2 years there. So there was this debate कि यार अनुराग को associate में डालें या analyst में डालें. तो वो फिर finally associate में हो गया. So it was okay. But until in the first 1 or 2 months while they were figuring that out, I was told that I'll be given an analyst salary. And I found 1 or 2 flats in Bandra, 1 bedroom. तो प्रमोद से मेरा बात हुआ कि यार आप सैलरी इतना दे रहे हो मुझे, आई कांट अफोर्ड to stay here. And Pramod was surprised, and I said, I gave him the math. And then he did some check with a lot of the other analysts, and he said, yeah, actually, Anurag, you're right, because most of the other analysts live with their family. इसलिए वो अफोर्ड कर पाते. तो मैंने पूछा, आप बताओ क्या करें. So then he figured out a solution, which involved kind of, I don't know if you lived in Bombay. So Bombay, typically when they quote a salary, they'll say ये 20 का पैकेज है. 20 का पैकेज मतलब 18 रेंट हो गया, 2 डिपॉजिट हो गया, या 25 का पैकेज है. सो 20 के पैकेज में समटाइम्स यू हैव सम फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी बेस्ड ऑन द लैंडलॉर्ड. जैसे 20,000 रुपीज अ मंथ, आप 15,000 रेंट दे दो, 5 लाख डिपॉजिट दे दो. या आप डिपॉजिट इतना नहीं दे सकते तो आप 19,000 रेंट दे दो, 1 लाख डिपॉजिट दे दो. So the flat was some 20,000 that time, around 25,000 rupees. So what Pramod and me agreed is that McKinsey would advance me the deposit. So we changed the structure of suppose it was a 25,000 car flat where you typically give a 2 lakh deposit, 23 rent. We made it 7 lakh deposit, 18,000 rent. So the rent was going from my pocket, the 7 lakh, Maheen was. So that was an interesting kind of interim solution that Pramod kind of solved for me. You probably will not remember this also. And then of course the salary anyway got changed a month and a half later. So it was not so much of a problem.
Interesting. And do you remember your first consulting project, sir?
First, well, in Amsterdam, it was a 3-4 week project in Switzerland, where I was pretty much working through the night because there was some M&A transaction for a bank. So nothing much to report there actually, apart from the long hours, but a lot of learning. India, I actually worked on at around 2000 is when I transferred to India. That's when the dot-com boom and the bust was also just about to happen. Later that year, the crash happened. So I did some work on internet startups in India. It was very interesting. So going through helping a startup build out its team from zero, and then helping go through the fundraising process, and then also failing. So the entire cycle was my first project in India, which was a 6 to 8 month project. It was a tough one. Yeah.
Tell us about आपके पास, you're earning a very cushioned, luxurious life in McKinsey, and then you wanted to start something of your own. How was that transition? And what was the idea? Heard the story of Abhishek sir, getting some 10,000 contract from a Japanese guy.
नहीं, तो मेरा तो transition simple था actually. I realized I never wanted to be a consultant. In the sense, I joined McKinsey because it was McKinsey, but मेरा desire was always कि I want to do something of my own. So that was clear. And I was I'd been 3.5 years in McKinsey, and I was getting married. And I felt that if I get married, and after I get married, I'll probably never leave McKinsey.
Comfort zone.
So the trigger for my decision was actually marriage. Okay. So, and I did, I'll get to that, but in retrospect, it was a terrible decision because I actually left McKinsey just 3 months before I got married.
Oh.
Then I got married, and then and my wife's very supportive, and but I then moved, before marriage, I was living a very lavish life, and that's what my wife now and then my fiance was used to. Suddenly after marriage, I take her to kind of a much smaller apartment, much further into the suburbs. Mumbai, as you know, is West's thing. Bandra is much further beyond Bandra. And I have to figure out what I want to do, right? So, but it worked out eventually. But so the trigger was that if I don't leave now, I'll probably not leave. So that was more of it.
And was it an arranged marriage or a?
This was I knew her for about 4 years.
Okay.
Her father, actually my younger brother, studied in Bombay. तो उनके admissions के लिए जब हम आए थे Bombay, my wife's father, we had some common family connection. He had helped Abhishek with the admissions, and that's how I got to know Shraddha. And then we dated for 3-4 years before getting married.
So you wanted to start something of your own. What next step is what to build? Who gets that?
See, once you get down the entrepreneurship path, right? And this is, this was also Ranjit. When I left McKinsey, I had a conversation at that time. The person heading the India office was a gentleman called Ranjit Pandit. So I had a exit conversation with him, and I said, I want to do this kind of thing. 2-3 years, it'll be, suppose I would like to come back, I choose to come back, this is anyway be very valuable to McKinsey because I would have had a real life experience on what's happened. He was very polite, but effectively what he said is, yaar, abhi aap ek bar, you go down the entrepreneurship path, that is not a straight path. और उसमें आप एक चीज ट्राई करोगे, फिर दूसरा करोगे, फिर तीसरा करोगे, तो आप डोंट फूल योरसेल्फ कि इट्स अ 2-year thing and then you'll come back, because वो होने वाला नहीं है, and that is actually what happened. So when I left, we did 2-3 things parallelly. One was what became eventually Cactus Communications. The other was I was interested at that time, this was in 2000, कि इंडिया में shirts जो है वो formal shirts you don't get at a good price. So that was the other thing. I found hired someone. Park Avenue का जो उस time head designer था, he joined me, and there was a person who knew production. So 3 of us, we started this brand called Something Grey. Imported fabric from Indonesia, got it manufactured in a factory somewhere, outsourced, and made about 500 pieces of different colors, styles, different collar styles, And then I got them shipped to Mumbai, and I tried to sell them to West Side and Shoppers Stop and Lifestyle, these chains. And that time I didn't think D2C, right? And D2C thinking tha hi nahi us time, abhi bahut obvious hai. Also didn't think that I can raise money and I should set out my own store. So it was more through these resellers. And so resellers, what happens is obviously your margins are very compressed. Payment cycles are 180 days. Often there might be some greasing of palms also. And तो 6 महीने 8 महीना किया, then I realized that this will actually not scale in the way I was thinking about it, right? And I wasn't thinking building out a brand myself. And so we stopped it. So we still had about 250 shirts left, which actually became the welcome gift for all new people that joined
Cactus.
So ये एक था. And then there was a Spanish company that was building out an inverter, which had some very unique features around it in terms of either saving power or giving more output. And they were looking for someone to distribute that in India. And so that discussion we had for a few months with them, finalized on an agreement to distribute that in UP, Bihar. So that was another kind of, so there's a lot of different things. You can just see the differences in the one is a manufacturing play in shirts, services play, एक ये distribution एक हो गया. So finally, Cactus Communications started to kind of show some promise, and I got into it full time along with Abhishek.
So help me understand, what was the genesis of Cactus Communication? Let's say if Harvard comes to you and says, we want to publish a case study on Cactus, what will be the turnaround points? What will be the strategic decisions that shaped the company where it is now? And how did it all start? What's the first product or first service that you were doing?
So I think the story is there on the website, on the internet, right? So Abhishek was my brother. He was in Japan on an internship. And he, at that time, now we're doing climate at Cactus Partners. But at that time, he was interested in doing something related to waste in India. So he was meeting a bunch of researchers and professors in Japan, seeing is there any new tech that can be brought to India to help manage recycle waste. So at the end of one such meeting, the professor, as they're walking out of the door, the professor stops Abhishek and tells him, Abhishek-san, your English is quite good. Can you please help me with edit my research paper? Abhishek studied business. This was science. He refuses. But the person kind of stops him and says, Nahi, Abhishek-san, I've heard you speak. So it's not saying, right? I've heard you speak. This is a stranger. And even if you don't understand my subject, I think you'll be able to add sufficient value. So please do this for me. So Abhishek reluctantly agrees. Then he makes Abhishek wait at the door, goes back to his desk, pulls out his wallet and comes and gives Abhishek 10,000 yen.
Which is
which is about $100. And as a student, Abhishek very excited. He tries to refuse, but the guy says, no, I want you to keep this money because, so that you remember your promise. And so Abhishek keeps that and he sends a manuscript a few days later, edit it. Abhishek is at the airport. He sends it to me. I just left McKinsey, or I was at a client site, I think. Anyway, we got the editing done, sent it back to him. He loved it. We developed a friendly rapport with him. 6 months after this, actually, I was with McKinsey at that time. 6 months after this, I had left. Abhishek had graduated. And we were brainstorming, क्या करें? तो हमको ये एक idea है कि यार एक stranger Japan में बैठा, he was willing to give money. There might be a larger opportunity. And so we launched kind of a website in 2002. launched this website targeted only at Japan, selling
English translation and
editing, mainly translation हम नहीं करते थे, editorial services. It just that's it. And we spoke to this professor who introduced us to one or two other people, and that's how we got started initially with the business. I think thought of it as a small thing because we thought, yeah, this is a very small business. Probably we'll be able to employ 10 editors. Let's just figure it out. So that was a start. And for the first, I think 3 to 5 years, it was we didn't really understand what we were doing because we started to sell it as English or as translation. But actually, the service we are providing, so the pivot or the real understanding came about maybe 3 to 4 years later when we realized actually the service we are providing is helping researchers get published. Before that, it was a general purpose, just an English service, where we also dabbled into online English education. We also provided English support for, say, HR professionals. It was more of an English thing for the first 5 years. After that, it became more of a research thing, helping researchers get published. And that's when I think when we refocused the company to that, and we let go of many things. We let go of, we had some of the big four firms as our clients, where we were doing financial research or financial work. A lot of that we let go. We focused on research, and I think the next 5 years was very heady growth, and mainly in Japan. So even until 2010, most 20% of our business was Japan. So a lot of the company that we built was ethos-wise, culture-wise, very Japanese in customer centricity, in doing good by the customer, ensuring the customer is always happy. And by 2010-11, we started to expand to other areas. US, I think we started in 2010, but in a larger way by 2013-14. And the business then grew in multiple ways. So we expanded categories from just working with researchers. We work with Big Pharma. We help them process their clinical trial data and get that published or get that data written up for sharing with physicians, with patients. So that we kind of expanded into. And then the last area in 2016-17 is where we invested a lot more in AI. That's when you might have met Nishya. The LLMs were not there then, so we kind of focused on building out our own LLM, our own software that might write, edit better, launch that. In the last 2-3 years, I think the progress has been rapid. So now we do a mix of our own versus proprietary stuff versus what's out there in the market. So there's a product called PaperPal, which helps researchers, again, focused on researchers, help researchers write better. So a lot of, I think the growth has been finding adjacencies and then growing into those adjacencies.
One question, because your name Cactus is very interesting. How did the story of Cactus comes into?
So when we started, I think if you look at our brand is called Heritage, heritage.com, right? And that is still there. Our writing, research and writing brand is Heritage. And we were, as I mentioned, in 2002, we were selling only online. It was online, a lot of, which is now more popular at that time, SEO, which I just started out, PPC, a lot of that is how we were getting business. 6 to 8 months after we started is when we had our first business trip to Japan. And that's when we started to think about business cards, because before that we didn't have business cards. So business cards as we thought of the company, we realized heritage as a word, while it's very powerful, it's also very limiting because it just defines the company, the category. And so we wanted a new name. We had a bit of a deadline because the trip was kind of 2 weeks away or 3 weeks away, and we had to get the name registered, get the business cards, etc. So उस time मेरे office में एक pad था, one of those clip-on pads with a photo of a cactus. I think I just suggested in jest कि how about cactus? तो सबने reject कर दिया. Cactus is a thorny plant. Why would you? So we went back home. The next day again we met. No other names. Cactus came back. It sticks basically the name, right? And then we called up a few of our customers in Japan, and they actually, what they told us is the cacti, the plant, there's something called saboten, which is a small cactus plant, which is a very popular business gift in Japan. So if you go to a Japanese, like an office like this, you might see like these small potted, you see those plants there?
Right. Mm-hmm.
You'll see these at in desks. So you get to see a little bit of green while you're working. You don't need to water it. You don't need to maintain it. And so we liked that. And Japan was a market. We said, okay, in Japan, it's viewed positively. We did some more reading on the cactus, and we liked what it represents, that, okay, the ability to survive harsh environments, doesn't need much to survive, is actually friendly to very desert travelers. And some of these qualities we also wanted the company to have, and that's how we adopted the name Cactus.
Quite interesting.
Well, in this,
Cactus is very beautiful also. I don't know if you've seen cacti, that flower, and and if you go to Peru and Latin America, which I learned much later on, obviously didn't know at that time, it is it's used in plant medicine here. So yeah.
You spoke about Japan was the first market that you got. If you have to, teach the Japanese ethos, what were certain interesting moments? First was the professor, right? But what have you learned from the Japanese culture? What were some interesting conversations that you had, which actually, you kind of.
So Japan, I think two things. One is it's very relationship driven. And they say, Japanese business partner or a customer is like a marriage, and that we've lived through. Marriage mein kya hota hai, things go wrong, but you sit and you solve for it, and you try and keep the goal is to try and keep the relationship going as long as possible, and the institution going as long as. So the Japanese customer, that's the advice. It's very tough to break in because you obviously don't get married to everyone, or you get, so it's tough to break in. But once you have that customer, the customer also works very hard with you to grow that relationship. And that we've witnessed firsthand, in Japan. So that is one. And the second is the customer centricity. So if you've ever traveled to Japan, you will see small things in terms of how the goods are packaged, how transportation is run, how service-oriented the hotels are. A lot of it is about the customer. Unlike the US, so when we got into the US, it was a bit of a culture shock for the team in the sense, I'll give you a small example. So if the Japanese customer, you would write an email, you would probably say, "Dear ABC, Hajime namaste," meaning how are you? How's your day? Hope things are going fine. And this is what I'm writing about, right? To a US customer, that first piece will be fluff. It'll be like, why are you wasting my time? Just get to the point. And okay, dear ABC, I wanted to update you about this, right? And it took us that just example, just to unlearn this
US way of
this Japanese way of talking to someone with some small talk, getting them warmed up. That took us time to unlearn. So it's very, very customer centric. So Japanese, typically if you travel to Japan, you will find people, something goes wrong in a hotel, they will apologize, even if it's not their mistake. Right? And the reason they do that is if you talk to them, they say, I'm not apologizing to you because I've done something wrong. The reason I'm apologizing to you is because you've been inconvenienced. That's the reason for my apology, because you've been inconvenienced. Now, it could be that actually it's your fault you've been inconvenienced. It could be the weather's fault. It could be my fault, but you've been inconvenienced, and that's the reason I'm saying sorry. It's kind of in my environment, it's happened. I'm saying sorry to it. And the US culture is very much like, okay, if I say sorry, you're going to blame me, or I'm going to get sued. And so there is reluctance to say sorry in the US. And that's another kind of just an opposite to the East and the West, that's diametrically opposite. There is a genuine customer centricity there. In terms of desire to they actually even feel that they feel sorry for you, so that has served us in good stead as a company and as the culture that we've built.
And when you say it's very hard to break in the Japanese ecosystem, right? Are there any interesting stories of getting your Japanese customer, or if a young person is trying to sell something to Japan, like what?
You've got to be persistent. I mean, this is or try again and again. You have to be absolutely on time. So 10 baje ka meeting hai. There would be times when we had a business meeting at 10 and we were 3 minutes early. So we would be waiting outside. Because being early for a meeting is also impolite, because you're forcing that person to leave something else and come and receive you.
So what's the right time, sir?
10 o'clock ka meeting hai, 10 o'clock about.
I just on this, I tell you, sir. My first meeting, actually, my first international trip was to Japan. And very interesting because I had won a quiz and the first prize was a trip to Japan. So my first trip internationally was Japan. And I kid you not, the culture shock is so immense that we actually had to do a performance. And of course, we as Indian, we take like 7:23 to 7:25 and all. They had put 7:23 as a time. The moment it hit 7:23, they stopped the performance. They're done with it. And because we were late by 2 minutes, they were feeling inconvenienced because they're looking at their watches and time. The sense of precision of time is insane. I mean, they apologize. Even the train is 30 seconds late, the conductor comes and personally apologizes to you.
It's incredible.
It's incredible to see.
Also, give a timing mein, jaise abhi we had, this was in the early days, we had a person working for us in the Japan team. And there was some of the deals or the business we did in Japan involved bidding. And there was a sealed bid that needed to be presented to the university, etc. And the sealed bid again has a time that it has to be come to a physical bid in a sealed envelope, has to come to this location, say by 3:30 p.m. in the afternoon. And this person who was working with us needed to get there by 3:30. He took a small turn. Jo 3:35 he reached, right? Of course, he didn't even go in to give the bid because he reached at 3:35, and he gave his resignation the next day.
Oh,
Right? कि मैं time पे नहीं पहुंच पाया. So the thoughts at the employee level also, no, it's just time wise it is
I want to specifically go into, this detail that after working again, this is an extension to the Japanese ecosystem, right? Then you went to South Korea and then multiple places around. How many countries does Cactus provide service?
So actually services, so now because it's a website, it's across 150 countries, but offices we have in Tokyo, in Seoul, in Shanghai and Beijing, Singapore, London and Princeton. And also Switzerland. Now we've actually got one in near Zurich, near Lucerne actually, and also in the UK, another facility. Yeah.
So I was seeing your strengths, which was mentioned over things, and one of the strengths was people management. And then we have done people management across so many countries, right? And people are
culturally, you're correct.
Culturally, at some level, are different.
Correct.
But as human species,
right,
there are some common things also.
Exactly.
What are some common things that you have, observed across the human?
So everyone wants leaders they can trust. Right. So trust as a value, that is one of our core values also at both at Cactus Partners and Cactus Communications. If you peel off, the cultural layers that make us a little different, in the end, a large binding force, at least for us, our values around trust, where, practiced both as to you should trust others, you should become trusting yourself. When in doubt, give benefit of, give the benefit to the other person. So that as an underlying human value really brings people together, really helps people bond, I think. If they believe they can trust the organization, trust the leadership, trust their peers. So that is one, I don't know if that I've answered your question correctly, but that is one thing that's common. I think generally just having, trust is one of our values, but just having a framework around common values across cultures. So that's something we do. I think wherever there is a need to localize, you localize a little bit, but you also standardize and have a global kind of feel to your company.
And how do you balance between being a global company and versus, making a product localized?
So global, to give you an example, like for our core services, the service is standardized across countries, but the way it's delivered is the customer service layer is in local language. It is by a local person. So, we have the customer service folks sitting in Tokyo, marketing folks sitting in Tokyo, salespeople in Tokyo who are meeting customers, talking to customers, attending calls, attending emails. So that's where you get the local version of the professional service. But the service itself is quite standard, right? But the packaging is local. And the way to think about that from a business perspective was you basically need oxygen to live, but you don't live for oxygen, right? So which is how profit in a business, profit is the oxygen.
Can you also repeat that again? When you need oxygen to live, but
you don't live for oxygen. So you don't live for valuation or you don't live for profit. You should not, ideally, right? That is, profit is essential to a business for the business to survive. है ना? तो हमारा thinking यही था कि profit तो होना चाहिए because the business needs to survive, needs oxygen, needs to survive. But we are not building it. If you're looking for profit, you're not building an institution. If you're just if profit is the only, profit is actually a very powerful motive, and that's the reason we became entrepreneurs. You want to earn money, you want, but that's not the reason. That's not the purpose of the enterprise. Even until maybe 12, 13 years of the business, we never really needed capital. So it was never a valuation game that we were chasing. It was always, let's make a good company, serve our clients well, have people working that actually enjoy working, have programs that allow people to grow. The business itself should scale, because as the business scales, then you have opportunities for growth for people in the company. And if you have opportunities for growth for people in the company, then they don't leave. They get enough growth here. So there was always this incessant desire that business has to keep growing, and for that, profits were always redeployed back into the business. And it was only, I think, in the last, say, 6-7 years, where the thinking has moved towards, okay, let's use M&A as a growth strategy. And so once you start to think of using M&A as a growth strategy, then that's when you start to think about external funding, and you start to think about raising capital. So that's how I would describe it, I think. I think we were never part of that race. Luckily, because actually when we started the company, that didn't exist. It's only in the last 10, 12 years more acutely where there's been a lot more money chasing entrepreneurs. There's a lot more dilution happening at early rounds. Many of them are good because those entrepreneurs go out and build really large companies because of that dilution. Many entrepreneurs, although we speak to, they feel like they've diluted too fast, too early. They don't have enough of a skin in the game. And they're like, we are the ones doing a lot of the work, the investors, taking away a lot of the gains. So that's happening now a lot more. And I think that cycle also is now changing because entrepreneurs have smartened up now. I think we're seeing also now when we're investing, many teams that have actually said, okay, I'll take as little money as I need because I don't want to over dilute, because I'm building something for the long term. So that change is also now happening especially with the correction in the last 2-3 years in terms of the VC cycle. Yeah.
So actually, one interesting question, because you have been serendipitous with chance encounter with the Japanese scholar, and you got that PMF right at the start because you knew you got a problem, you got a solution, and then you got someone who's willing to pay for it, and you got very serendipitously lucky. What would be your thoughts for someone who is trying to build the other way around, which is they have no idea what the problem is, then building from bottom up? How would we go about being trying to increase the chances of being lucky
in terms of getting all these three?
What they say is hard work is necessary for luck, but tough actually. I think what has worked is having a team. So even if you want to do something, have 2 or 3 people that you want to do it with, because the ideas of the chance of serendipity is higher. So for example, in this case, Abhishek was the one who met the professor. I was maybe able to think about the commercial implication of that. And and then we had someone else, right? So I think even to know that there is a PMF or there is a product market thing, often 2-3 brains help you figure that out. The same thing, people see it from different things, right? So have to understand who you are, understand, and at an early age, you actually don't know that. So scratch that, but pick 2-3 people you like working with. You naturally draw people that are complementary, actually, is what I find. When founding teams come together at a young age, typically you find people who complement each other. And so ek wo I would suggest. I think doing will help you find the answer rather than thinking. So often you're waiting for that perfect idea, but perfect idea is nothing, kuch hota nahi hai actually. Most ideas are already taken. Typically, any bright idea, you think that this is a fresh idea I'm starting with. At that same time, I think at least 10 other people have started work on the same idea. So a lot of the PMF or finding, this might work, is actually iterative. And so doing is better. Starting to do it as fast as possible will allow you to iterate faster. So for us also, while it seems that we got the PMF first, the PMF actually understanding the business took us 4-5 years. So I think to me, the PMF actually happened only 3 years later, which in retrospect, I'm thinking we are so dumb, we should have figured it out much earlier. Right? But that's only in retrospect. So it is iterative, I think.
Let's imagine you are the Japanese professor and we are, let's say, young folks, Abhishek and people who are watching, these are all the young folks. Is there any problem that we can solve for you? And if we solve that for you, you're ready to pay some money right away. So imagine it's like, what is that one product or a service that you really, really want, but nobody is building for you? And if somebody solved that for you in either personal life or businesses, all the multiple businesses, ready to, what else?
If I knew that answer, it would already be a service. or a product. But I think that's an answer Abhishek will know better.
Okay.
Because I've moved a little bit away from the business now. And so for me right now to understand what the Japanese professor wants, I don't know. I know that what startup founders look for now. I think one of the things we find when we meet founders is many of them have, for them obviously the capital matters, the valuation matters, but many of them also seeking now partners who can be long-term, who they enjoy working with. So that filter, good founders have started to apply. They understand the value that an investor brings in. And some of the wins we've had against larger firms is the fact that, the mix of the team has a bit of an operator tendency. So that founders are liking. So I think we are at the investment firm, we are quite sweetly placed, I think, right now in being able to find opportunities and actually close those opportunities also, just because of the kind of team we built.
Last thing before we go to the small rapid fire round that we have. So you spoke, जब आपकी शुरुआत में बताया था, you spoke about the GA playbook, right?
Gap, yes.
Gap. Usme the third thing was marketing and branding. And you mentioned marketing is different from branding.
So marketing is at a very high level. Marketing is anything that gives you immediate revenue.
Okay.
As in,
check some business.
Today you spent some money. So again, example would be spending on keywords on Google.
Right.
You spent some money today. Based on the money you spent today, at this instant, someone has clicked on the ad. And based on that click in the ad, they've actually called you or they've submitted an inquiry, right? So that is marketing. So marketing also involves creative. It is analytical. To be successful in marketing, there's a strong or the job person. You need to be able to look at data and make meaning of the data to decide, okay, how should I change my marketing strategy or marketing tactics? Branding is more long term, where you can't really identify if you're getting business from it. For us to attend a conference and sponsor something there, that would be branding, because you've got people know a little bit more about you, the community you're appealing to, but it may not result in any direct leads. Participating in a great place to work kind of a survey, that is branding. That doesn't necessarily have any marketing outcomes. And so branding typically is something that you tend not to do because it is not giving you the, or even if it does give you, you can't quantify it. So if you're a smart founder, you'll be like, okay, I don't know why I should spend money here because I can't see the visible inquiry or the visible revenue. And so you land up under-investing in branding in the initial, and correctly so actually, in the initial part of your startup journey, you will under-invest in branding, which is actually good. But then you forget to turn it on. And because you get so caught up in building the business that you are not able to step away and say, hey, actually my brand looks like this now, or my website looks like this, it needs a rehaul, or that actually, apart from this set of customers that use me, no one else knows about me. And how do I get, my brand more visibility?
What's the right time? It's the stage that you are in, it's the revenue.
I think once you have kind of product market fit. So because branding you should only do once you know who you're selling to, once you know what you're selling, right? Because brand is more powerful. So product market fit to definitely hona chahiye. You should have some revenue. Your marketing should be kicking off a little bit.
Okay.
And then you should, Yeah.
Tell us one thing that you often find yourself teaching your kids or saying your kids.
To be kind.
Okay.
I mean, there's a few things. So if you want to, I can expand on it. So be kind in the sense that, okay, it's a tough world out there. And I think in the end, what I realized is good people like to work with good people. And generally, if you're kind, it kind of comes back to you. So that's one thing. Second is not to worry too much about the end.
Mm-hmm.
So enjoy whatever you're doing right now. Like my son, I have my son's 20. He's in university. तो उसको अभी career का stress हो रखा है, which is natural. And I also had it at that time. So often this is a deaf ear, but I try to tell him that, you don't focus too much on 10 years from now. We all taught to say interview question standard hai ki 5 saal baad aap kya karna cha rahe ho, 10 saal baad aap kya karna cha rahe ho, which is actually good to have at high level, but actually the joy or your life is built on today. And so try and spend time on the today and not worry too much about the future. My twin girls are 6.5. So I have like a bit of an age gap. I have twin girls who are 6.5. उनके लिए तो I learned this from them rather telling them because they are so much in the now. पीछे का नहीं सोचते. आप अगर लाइफ को आप अगर मोमेंट बाय मोमेंट जी सकते हो, then you're sorted out. Because stress, where does stress come from, right? Either it's regret of the past or anxiety about the future. आज के अगर आप अभी ये मोमेंट में अगर रहते हो, तो actually there is no stress. If you actually, that's what meditation is about. Meditation teaches you to be in the moment.
Power of now.
हाँ, तो अगर आप in the moment हो, आज हम बात कर रहे हैं, we are in this moment. If you're not worried about your next meeting, if you're not worried about, how will you find that next whatever podcast person, or you're not worried about the fact that okay, late ho gaye yaar, we left this, then there's no stress actually.
If you have to, again, sorry to take you to the future anxiety, sir.
Please take me to the future anxiety.
Tell me about how do you see future? So Peter Thiel says ki one way to build something is to try to predict future, have a conviction, start building, start reverse engineering, right? What sense do you have about the future? If you have to predict one thing about future, how do you see the current trends in your field, in your life, converging, let's say 5 years or 10 years down the lane?
That's a big question. I thought it was a rapid fire. I won't be able to rapid. No, one thing. So I think for me, the biggest macro trend that's happening is longevity. So longevity means कि अभी जो your granddad's generation at around 50s, they would be like यार life खत्म हो गया. हमारे dad के generation में, and obviously we are different generations, but assuming we are the same generation, but people who are parents now, they're going to live till their 70s. Trump is fighting his late 70s. Modi is a late 70s candidate, right? And so very productive, very impactful at that age. So you can imagine 25 years from now, actually 90 will be the 70s maybe, right? Because there will be enough technologies to reverse aging or to stop it. So aging happens because your cells, you die because either your cells start to age or you have the kind of a disease of some sort, right? And disease के लिए there's enough technology being developed कि यार वो disease को बंद ही कर देंगे. Aging के लिए जो cellular aging है, there are technologies being developed to at least arrest it. So if how you are looking today, you will continue to look like that, right? So you won't reverse back to 5 years ago, it will continue to look like that. So there's technologies on longevity that's happening, and generally, so what that means, what implications does that have? Is pehle you would get married, 25 years would be the length of a marriage, 30 years. So marriage lengths have increased. So will marriage as a institution survive for that? Will there be many? Will a person typically be expected to do 2 or 3? 2 or 3 partners just as an accepted norm. Will you expect 2 or 3 careers? Will you expect to kind of be re-educated or learn, unlearn 2 or 3 times? So that is, I think, so there is no one career. That is a big macro shift that I think at the time of around the 40, 45, people will change careers. And again at 60, 65, again, they might change.
That's happening in the startup world also. A lot of people, founders in their 40s are taking the leap.
Correct. Oh, बहुत हो रहा है. So yeah, because 40s में suddenly you aren't feeling as old, You are... earlier, 40s where people would be like at 50 that will start thinking of retiring. That is not happening anymore. So that just means that there'll be a lot more productivity in the older people, which is good and bad, I guess. I mean, there are a lot of implications of that, right? So
if you were to interview Pramod sir, what is one thing that you will ask him?
I would ask him, where does he get the energy from to rebuild? He's just built several institutions and he keeps doing it. He keeps doing it. So what is that? What drives him to be able to do that? I think that's something I'd really like to.
Last thing, sir. They say that you're the sum of 5 people that you surround yourself with.
Correct.
If you were 22, if you were early again, who will be the 5 people that you would like to surround yourself with? Do you think people around you had an impact on your life? How you think, how you behave, and on your success especially?
Yeah, definitely.
So then now you have to consciously design your 22. Who will you surround yourself with? It can be the same or it can be the new people that you met later in your life.
I think if there's nothing that I'm really saying that, I wish I had known this at 22, I would have lived a different life, because maybe I would have, maybe I would not have. Whatever I've lived, I'm happy with how whatever failures have happened, whatever, successes have happened. People I would like to get to know, who I don't know. I think in the US, there's a venture capitalist called Vinod Khosla. So he's someone that I, at some point, wish early on in my life. I still don't know him, but it would have been good to, if I knew him, it would have been good to know him around 22, 23. There might have been some learning from him. There's someone called Adam Grant.
Yeah. I've read his book.
So these are guys I don't know personally, so I'm giving you those names, I guess. But Adam Grant is someone else I'd like to kind of maybe get to know.
I'll tell you when. So I worked with this company called Masters Union. Have you heard about Masters Union?
Masters Union, yeah. It's a
B School
expert kind of platform. B School, yeah.
So I used to work with Pratham, and Pratham is an alumnus of Wharton, and he's trying to get Adam Sir to India to teach his kids. So whenever Adam Sir is in India, I'll drop you a message. If you are around Gurgaon,
I would love to.
Okay, done.
I think Sabyasachi would be interesting to talk to. What is he able to build from a design franchise internationally? No Indian has been able to do in this modern age, right? So that is, he would be interesting to talk to.
How did Plaksha happen, sir?
Plaksha, I was actually fundraising. Someone introduced me to SK कि SK से बात करो, वो आपको बताएगा
LP कौन है?
कि LP या कैसे आप फंड का स्ट्रैटेजी बनाओ, ये वो अर्ली डेज फर्स्ट ईयर में. तो SK से मैंने बात किया, तो it was a 1 hour Zoom call. This is just around COVID or just after COVID. So he heard me for about 50 minutes. Then he said, Anurag, abhi ho gaya, and he gave me some thoughts, ideas, ye wo. Then he said, abhi yaar, I want to talk to you about something. तो फिर 5 मिनट में मुझे प्लक्षा का पिच दिया.
5 मिनट में क्या बोलिए सर डील हम लोग?
He said हम बना रहे हैं, स्पेशल यूनिवर्सिटी बना रहे हैं. It is going to be the likes of a US university in India. And we've got a fantastic this thing already in place. I think I'm sold. So India में क्या है, there's a big gap. And you spend so much foreign exchange. My son is also studying abroad. You spend so much foreign exchange outside India. So it's still them. They need less 20-30 plakshas there.
So I was recently with the Saurabh sir, Rishi Hood.
So I'm involved in Rishi Hood also. Huh?
That's how I got to know. So you mentioned that there are a lot of Plaksha founders that are involved. Over on the board of, there were 2 or 3 people that he named. I think Mukul Agarwal.
Mukul ji, correct.
You, and then there was one more person from Plaksha. But how did Rishi Hood happen?
The Rishi Hood happened because we were actually part of our CSR initiatives at Cactus Communications. We were introduced to Shobit and Sahil in 2015, before Rishi Hood, where they ran something called Vision India Foundation, where they would actually get people and run fellowships, and they needed sponsorship for each fellowship. So we started there. Then when that morphed about 3-4 years later into Rishi Hood, then we became supporters on Rishi Hood.
Thank you so much, sir. I genuinely enjoyed it.